Welcome to another Fantasy Goodfellas video where we talk about the top 15 tight end rankings for week 10. You ready?
The Fantasy Goodfellas.
Boom, boom, boom. Rolling on the field.
The Fantasy Goodfellas.
All right, before we get started, let me remind you these are not our rankings. We're reacting to these rankings. And then we also hope that we show you some trends and some stats that will help you with your own lineups. Let's get started. At number 1, Mark Andrews versus the Cleveland Browns. Mark Andrews is having a good season. It all depends on touchdowns for tight ends. He had 80 receiving yards in week 9. That was good for 13 and no touchdowns. So if you want to look at his touchdown rankings for the season, he's 2 touchdowns. He's been okay. And I think the problem with Mark Andrews is that offense can go any which way. There's no consistency. And if you see here, he's only been in the top 5 3 times out of the 9 weeks. But if you got Mark Andrews, you're going to have to play him. At number 2, Sam Laporta at the Los Angeles Chargers. Sam Laporta, he is a great tight end there, and he gets a lot of usage, and so he does really well. He's not getting into the end zone as much as you'd like to see. But again, it's on a good offense, and he's going to perform well. At number 3, George Kittle at the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the Jaguars' defense is a little susceptible to good offenses. I think this is the time you got George Kittle can be an elite receiver tight end type this week, and I think that's going to bode well. I like George Kittle going against the Jacksonville Jaguars. At number 4, you have Dalton Schultz at the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, Dalton Schultz is figuring out that offense in Houston. C.J. Stroud is doing really well. And this is what this offense looks like. You know, this is a young quarterback, and look at all the different receivers. You got 2 tight ends, you got 5 different wide receivers, and that just shows a lot of diversity on that, and 5 TDs. So I think Dalton Schultz can do well only because C.J. Stroud is playing so well. At number 5, T.J. Hockenson versus the New Orleans Saints. You know, T.J. Hockenson is good. Now you have Joshua Dobbs as the quarterback. He did good in the first week, not knowing what the heck is going on, but I think this is where you might run into a wall. I don't expect T.J. Hockenson to have that good of a game just because it's still going to take some time for that offense to gel with a new quarterback. At number 6, Dalton Kincaid versus the Denver Broncos. Now, I've been saying all season the Denver Broncos defense sucks, and Dalton Kincaid and Buffalo is going against them. That doesn't mean that they're going to perform well. And I think this is what Dalton Kincaid's stats looks like. He's been picking it up a little bit, 7th and 6th. So I think they are including him in that offense, so that bodes well for Kincaid owners. At number 7, Evan Ingram versus the San Francisco 49ers. Now, if you look at Evan Ingram and you look at the season of what he's doing, he's getting some usage. That's yardage. If you see that kind of consistent, that he's part of the game plan. It's the touchdowns for tight ends. No touchdowns. Does Evan Ingram get into the end zone this week? I think he can. But again, that San Francisco 49ers defense, they can shut you down. So it'll be interesting to see if Evan Ingram can get into the end zone. At number 8, Kyle Pitts at the Arizona Cardinals. I think there's going to be a quarterback change. So that's going to be interesting to see. Now, Kyle Pitts had 56 receiving yards. And to me, it just goes on what are you trending? He's looking around 40 yards every game. And TD-wise, he's only scored once whole season. I think it's going to be much of the same, which is going to be about 40 yards and no TDs. I would think about benching him. At number 9, Cole Kmet versus the Carolina Panthers. Cole Kmet did excellent. Now all of a sudden you might have Justin Fields coming back. Could be slight quarterback controversy, But does Cole Kmet get 2 touchdowns again this week? Probably not. But you got to ride with the hot hand sometimes. But if you just look at what he did all season, this was what it gives you. He has been the number 1 tight end 2 weeks all season. So that's pretty good. Number 10, Trey McBride versus the Atlanta Falcons. Now that you got Kyler Murray coming back, it doesn't mean that all your receivers and all your positional players will perform well. It just means that Kyler Murray's coming back. He still can run it. I'm not sure I'd take Trey McBride this week. At number 11, Jake Ferguson versus the New York Giants. Now, this is the guy that I think that you got to start. It just, he's figuring out that offense. Dak Prescott is heating up. He's playing better each week. And I think Jake Ferguson could be much higher on this list. I think we got to depend on Jake Ferguson now. At number 12, Tamm Hill at the Minnesota Vikings. Now, again, Tamm Hill, we know he can do a lot of different things on the field. It's just, what is it going to be needed of him this week? Will it be being a receiver? Will it be a running back? And I think that's what it matters. But he has been scoring and getting into the end zone each of the last 3 weeks, so that definitely bodes well. And it's Tamm Hill. At number 13, David Njoku versus the Baltimore Ravens. And he had a great week 9 because he got into the end zone. If you don't get into the end zone, that's terrible. And that's why tight ends are all touchdown dependent. And if you look, here's his receiving yards, and here's his TDs. He's scored the last 2 weeks. But what we really care about is what's that offense look like now. You have Deshaun Watson came back. He got into the end zone, gave one to the tight end. And so that's looking well for David to kind of get into the end zone again this week. I like him there. At number 14, you got Gerald Everett versus the Detroit Lions. Now, again, Gerald Everett had 18 receiving yards in week 9, and all of a sudden now you're in your top 15. I just don't see it. I think that's a stretch. There might be some other players to try. At number 15, Logan Thomas at the Seattle Seahawks. I think Logan Thomas had an off week, but I think this is the week he can get back into the end zone, and that's what I'm kind of dependent on. And if you look here for his TDs on the season, he's scored only 3 weeks all season, and that's not too good. And then if you look at Logan Thomas, he had 31 receiving yards. So it's all about the touchdowns when it comes to tight ends. Now I'm going to show you another ranking here. Let me just pull it up as I talk to you. What we're trying to do now is look for the top positional players when it comes to tight ends for week 9. And so I'm going to show you this because this is what I care to look at the most, which is who's doing well and who could be on your waiver wire pickups. But here's some names. Now, if you're on a 16-team league, here's all the players. Drew Sample at number 9 for the Cincinnati Bengals. That is a surprise. You got Jake Ferguson. He was 6. And then you look here, Irv Smith Jr. for the Bengals again. I don't see 2 tight ends being in the top 16 again. And Dalton Kincaid and Tyler Conklin. And then you have some other people there. Look at this, tight ends. I see 3 Cincinnati Bengal tight ends. But this gives you a snapshot of who you might pick up in the waiver wire. So take a look at this. Look at some hit lists here that you might want to pick up. Noah Gray from Kansas City. Isaiah Likely. If you have some of these players, it might help you. And that's what the tight end rankings for Week 10 looks like. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and good luck for this week.
Those Fantasy Goodfellas.
Boom, boom, boom. Rolling on the field.
Those Fantasy Goodfellas.